My name is Joseph Yazi, and I've served as a Navajo Nation tribal police officer for 12 years. What I'm about to tell you violates every oath I've taken, but after what happened at Devil's Canyon last month, silence is no longer an option. Some truths are too dangerous to hide, even when revealing them could cost me everything. It started on September 15th, 2024, when dispatch called about 3 missing hikers, David Chen, Rebecca Martinez, and Kyle Thompson, graduate students from ASU's geology department who thought they'd discovered something extraordinary through satellite analysis. Their professor reported them missing after they failed to return from what was supposed to be a day trip to document geological anomalies in the desert northwest of the Grand Canyon. My partner, Patricia B.A., and I responded to the call. Patricia is traditional. She still follows the old ways, performs blessing ceremonies, and knows songs our grandmothers taught us. When dispatch gave us the coordinates, her face went pale as moonlight on snow. "Not there, Joey," she whispered, clutching her medicine bundle. "We need to call the feds. Let them handle Devil's Canyon." But I was stubborn, educated, modern. I'd graduated from Northern Arizona University with a degree in criminal justice. I believed in evidence and procedure, not in stories passed down through generations. These were just kids, probably dehydrated and lost in terrain that could kill you in hours when the desert temperature climbed past 100 degrees. The drive to the site felt wrong from the moment we left the paved road. The asphalt gave way to gravel, then dirt, then barely visible tracks through scrub brush and red sand. But it wasn't just the deteriorating road that unsettled me. It was the silence. The desert has its own symphony. Insects buzzing, ravens calling, lizards rustling through dried vegetation. As we drove deeper into this forgotten corner of Arizona, all those familiar sounds faded until there was nothing but our engine and a whisper of wind that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. We found their rental SUV exactly where the GPS coordinates indicated, parked at the edge of what appeared to be a canyon, but something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. I've lived in this region my entire life, traveled every back road and hiking trail, studied every topographical map. This canyon shouldn't exist. It wasn't marked on any survey I'd ever seen, wasn't mentioned in any geological report, wasn't even visible in satellite imagery I'd reviewed during our drive. The vehicle's door stood open like metal wings, keys still dangling from the ignition. The engine had run until it consumed every drop of fuel in the tank. Inside, we discovered their research materials scattered across the seats. Printouts of satellite images showing radiation anomalies, geological surveys that didn't make sense, and a journal entry in David Chen's handwriting that made my skin crawl. The rocks here predate Earth itself. Our isotope analysis suggests they're older than our solar system. The mathematical impossibility of this discovery changes everything we understand about planetary formation. How can matter this ancient exist in a location that shouldn't be here? But it was the canyon itself that truly disturbed me. The opening was narrow, maybe 30 feet across at the rim, but it plunged into absolute darkness. Our flashlights, powerful LED units capable of illuminating objects hundreds of yards away, couldn't penetrate the shadows below. Even though the afternoon sun blazed overhead, the canyon seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating a void that hurt to look at directly. Patricia was examining something carved into the sandstone when she called me over with urgency in her voice. The petroglyphs were unlike anything I'd seen before, and I'd grown up surrounded by ancient Navajo, Hopi, and Anasazi rock art. These symbols were fresh, carved maybe decades ago rather than centuries. They depicted impossibly tall, thin figures with too many joints in their arms and legs, surrounding a spiral pattern that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. Below the strange petroglyphs, someone had carved words in English using what appeared to be a knife blade. National Geographic Expedition 1982. God forgive us for what we've awakened. We need to leave, Patricia said, backing away from the canyon edge. Her hand moved instinctively to her service weapon. Look at the shadows, Joey. I followed her gaze and felt my rational worldview shatter. Our shadows were falling upward, defying every law of physics I understood. The sun, which should have been setting in the west, appeared to be descending toward the eastern horizon. And according to my phone, somehow 3 days had passed while we'd been examining the scene for what felt like 10 minutes. That's when we heard them singing. 3 voices echoed from the depths of the canyon, the missing hikers calling out in harmonics that shouldn't be possible for human throats to produce. The melody was beautiful and terrible simultaneously, creating frequencies that my teeth ache and my vision blur around the edges. Patricia began praying in Navajo, invoking protections I hadn't heard since my grandmother's funeral, scattering corn pollen in a protective circle around us. Don't listen, she warned. It's not them anymore. Something else is using their voices. The singing grew louder, accompanied by the sound of drums beating in rhythms that hurt to follow, and flutes playing notes that seemed to exist between the standard musical scale. Underneath it all, I could hear something that sounded like breathing, as if the canyon itself was inhaling and exhaling with massive unseen lungs. Then absolute silence fell like a physical weight. 3 figures appeared on the opposite rim of the canyon. Even from 30 feet away, I could see they were our missing hikers, but something fundamental had changed about them. Their limbs bent in too many places, their heads rotated too far around on their necks, and their eyes reflected light like nocturnal predators, glowing amber in the impossible sunset. David Chen called out, though his mouth booth synchronized with the words, "We've been waiting for you. We have so much to show you about what's really hidden here." Rebecca Martinez stepped forward, and I noticed her feet weren't touching the ground. She hovered inches above the rock surface, her hair flowing as if she were submerged in water. She said, her voice seeming to come from multiple directions. The National Geographic team was right about some things, but they were wrong about what this place really is. It's not a gateway. It's a wound in reality that's been bleeding for almost 80 years. Kyle Thompson's laugh sounded like glass breaking in a distant room. The Manhattan Project didn't start with Trinity. This was July 14, 1945, 2 days before the official first test. They experimented with something here that wasn't designed to split atoms. It was engineered to split space itself, to create a doorway to somewhere else entirely. And God help us all, it worked. Patricia's prayer intensified, her voice carrying power I didn't know she possessed. She threw corn pollen toward the 3 figures, and where the blessed dust touched them, their skin rippled like disturbed water. They screamed in perfect unison, a sound that made my nose bleed and doubled my vision. "The Dene knew," Rebecca shrieked, her form flickering between human and something geometric and impossible. "Your ancestors understood to stay away. They marked this place with warnings, but the white scientists came with their arrogance and their technology, and they tore a hole in the fabric of existence." The ground beneath us began to pulse like a massive heartbeat. The canyon was expanding and contracting rhythmically, and I could feel reality becoming unstable around the edges of my perception. Patricia's prayer reached a crescendo, and suddenly the world snapped back to normal like a rubber band under tension. The sun returned to its proper position in the western sky, our shadows fell in the correct direction. The 3 hikers vanished as if they'd never existed. But written in the sand at our feet, carved in letters that looked like volcanic glass, was a message that would haunt my dreams. We're still here. We're all still here. Everyone who's ever entered the canyon remains, waiting, watching, becoming something new. Patricia and I ran. We reached our vehicle and drove faster than was safe on those dirt roads, not stopping until we hit paved highway. Only then did I check my phone again. September 15th, 4:23 p.m. We'd been at the canyon for less than an hour, though my body felt like I'd been awake for days. We filed our report. "3 days after my initial encounter at Devil's Canyon, the elders called an emergency council meeting. It was held in the old Hogan near Window Rock, a structure that had stood since before Arizona became a state. My grandmother's grandmother had helped build it, and it was only used for the most serious matters: treaty negotiations, war councils, and discussions of threats to the Dene people as a whole. I wasn't supposed to attend. Tribal police officers don't usually participate in elder councils unless specifically invited. But Patricia's grandmother, Maria B.I., insisted we both be present. She was one of the most respected Hatai medicine people in the nation, and her word carried absolute authority. "They need to hear this from the ones who witnessed it," she said, her weathered hands gripping her walking stick. "The young ones who still have courage to act." 12 elders were present, each representing different clans and regions. The air was thick with sage smoke and tension. In the Hogan Center, someone had created a sand painting I'd never seen before. It depicted the canyon not as a physical place, but as a wound with dark tendrils spreading outward like infection through living tissue. Thomas Benali, the eldest at 93, spoke first. His voice was paper-thin, but carried absolute authority. "My father was present in 1945, not at Trinity, but at the first test, the one they've erased from history. He was hired as a guide, warned them it was a bad place where the hero twins had fought something ancient and sealed it away. They didn't listen. He produced a leather journal, its pages yellow with age. He documented everything in our language so they couldn't read it." The old man's eyes met mine across the sacred fire. July 14th, before dawn. They brought a device different from what they would test at Trinity 2 days later. This one was smaller, covered in symbols that caused physical pain to observe directly. Dr. Kreger, the lead scientist, explained it wasn't designed to release energy, but to absorb it, to tear a hole and examine what existed on the other side. Maria B.I. continued the story, her voice steady despite the fear in her ancient eyes. "The old stories speak of the Nayeye, the monsters that existed before the world was in balance. The hero twins destroyed most of them, but some could only be imprisoned, not killed. Devil's Canyon was one of those prisons." She looked directly at me. "Your grandfather understood this, Joseph. That's why he tried to encode warnings during the war. But the military commanders thought he was talking about enemy positions, not about horrors buried beneath our own sacred land." Patricia spoke up, unusual for someone so young in such a gathering. "When the 3 hikers returned to our station, something was wrong beyond their unchanged appearance. Their body temperatures were exactly 98.6 degrees, their heartbeats perfectly synchronized. When we tried to separate them for individual questioning, they spoke identical words simultaneously. 'We are one now. We are many. We are the space between spaces.' Elder Susan So leaned forward. "Show them the video footage." Patricia hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She'd managed to download the body camera footage before federal agents wiped our servers. The elders watched in absolute silence as the scene at the canyon played out. The backward sunset, the floating hikers, the message written in volcanic glass. When the video ended, Thomas Benally was crying. "It's worse than we feared. They didn't just open a door, they shattered the seal completely, and now the contamination is spreading." He led us to a storage room where ancient artifacts were kept. From a locked chest, he retrieved a map made on deer hide, probably 2 centuries old. It showed the Southwest, but not as modern cartography would represent it. Instead, it marked places of power, locations of danger, and migration routes of entities that weren't entirely human. Devil's Canyon was marked with a symbol resembling a spiral collapsing into itself. But what terrified me were the other markings. Thin red lines spreading from the canyon like veins, connecting to sites across Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Dates were written along these lines in a mixture of Navajo and Spanish: 1945, 1956, 1971, 1982, 1997, 2010, 2024. "This map was created by my great-grandmother," Thomas explained. "She was a dreamer, capable of perceiving things others couldn't. She foresaw this catastrophe." He pointed to the spreading lines. "Every time someone disturbs the canyon, the contamination spreads further. The boundaries between realities weaken." "What happens when all the lines connect?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Then the prison opens completely," Maria said quietly, "and what's been contained since the fourth world began will be free in the fifth." That night, Patricia and I were assigned to patrol the area around where Devil's Canyon should have been. Officially, we were searching for traces of the missing hikers, but we both understood our real purpose: ensuring no one else approached the contaminated site. Around midnight, our radio erupted with static, then cleared to reveal a transmission that shouldn't have been possible. The voice spoke in ancient Navajo, ceremonial language that few people still understood. Patricia translated, her face growing paler with each word. "The sleepers wake. The stone that holds reality cracks. 79 years of erosion, and the dam will break. Those who opened the way will become the way. Those who witnessed will become the testimony." Then, in perfect English, David Chen's voice said, "Officer Yazi, we need to talk. Come alone to coordinates I'm about to transmit. Bring the journal your grandfather left you. Yes, we know about it. We know everything now." The coordinates appeared on my phone as a text from an unknown number. A location 3 miles from where the canyon had been, where 3 large rocks formed a natural shelter. Patricia tried to stop me, but I had to go. My grandfather's journal, hidden since his death, supposedly contained information about the 1945 test that even the government didn't possess. I arrived at the rocks at 1 a.m. The 3 hikers were there, but also not there. They flickered between states like a television with poor reception, sometimes solid, sometimes transparent, sometimes something that hurt to perceive. When they were translucent, I could see through them to something else. A vast city of impossible architecture, buildings that grew like organic entities, streets that folded back on themselves, and at the center, a massive spiral structure pulsing with dark energy. "Joseph," they said in perfect unison, their voices creating harmonics that made my ears bleed. "You need to understand what really happened here. Not the government's version, not even what your elders know, the complete truth." David Chen stepped forward, or rather, the entity wearing his appearance did. In 1945, Manhattan Project scientists discovered something in their calculations. a frequency, a resonance that could tear holes in space-time itself. But they needed a specific location to test it, somewhere that the dimensional boundaries were already thin. They found Devil's Canyon through old Spanish colonial records from the 1600s, accounts of conquistadors reporting cities in the sky and voices from beneath the earth. Rebecca Martinez continued, her form solidifying slightly. The device they tested wasn't a bomb. It was a key designed to unlock doors that had been sealed since your world was young. But they didn't understand what they were unlocking. They believed they were opening pathways to parallel dimensions, alternate Earths they could exploit for resources. Kyle Thompson's laugh was that same glass-grinding sound. Instead, they opened a passage to the spaces between dimensions, the void where entities that can't exist in ordered reality make their home. We've been there, Joseph. We've seen them. The Nayeye your grandmother spoke of are real, but they're not monsters. They're refugees from collapsed realities, beings that exist in states of matter we don't have words for. Why are you telling me this? I asked, gripping my grandfather's journal tighter. Because the convergence happens in 3 days, they said together. October 1st, 3:33 a.m., exactly 79 years, 2 months, and 18 days after the first test. A complete orbital cycle of something massive approaching from the void. The government knows. They're preparing to detonate another device, thinking they can seal the rift, but they're wrong. It will only make the situation catastrophically worse. He led us to a storage room where ancient artifacts were kept. From a locked chest, he retrieved a map made on deer hide, probably 2 centuries old. It showed the Southwest, but not as modern cartography would represent. October 1st, 2024, 2:30 a.m. I stood at the coordinates burned into my arm, watching the impossible unfold before my eyes. Where Devil's Canyon should have been, reality itself was beginning to thin like worn fabric. Through the weakening boundaries, I could see architecture that defied every law of physics I understood, vast structures of living geometry, cities that breathed, technologies that were also organisms. The government's response had been swift and overwhelming. The entire region around Devil's Canyon had been declared a national security zone. Military checkpoints appeared on every road, Apache helicopters circled overhead, and anyone within 50 miles was evacuated under the pretense of a chemical spill. But Patricia and I knew the truth. Something called Project Cauterize had been activated, a black budget operation on standby since the 1950s, designed to handle what they termed ontological breaches. Agent Sarah Winters had visited our station 2 days earlier. She wasn't military, FBI, or anything with a recognizable badge. She wore a black suit that seemed to absorb light, and when she moved, reality lagged slightly behind her, as if she existed a fraction of a second out of sync with the rest of the world. Officers Yazi and BA, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't exist in human speech. We need to discuss your contact with the anomalous entities. I played ignorant. We filed our report. The missing hikers were found and transferred to federal custody. She smiled, and for a moment I saw too many teeth. Joseph, we know about the device. We know about your grandfather's journal. We know about the frequency. What you don't understand is that we've been managing this situation for 79 years. Every possible solution has been tried and tested. Nothing works. Then why try to stop us? Patricia demanded. Because, Agent Winters said, her movements unnaturally fluid as she sat down, what you're planning won't close the rift. It will stabilize it, yes, but in doing so, it will make the merger permanent. The two realities will be locked together forever. We prefer a clean break. Either our reality survives intact or it doesn't. No half measures. She produced a tablet and showed us classified footage from 1945, the original test. I watched in horror as the device activated, reality twisted like heated plastic, and something vast and impossible began pushing through from the other side. But what struck me most were the people in the footage. Some of them weren't entirely human even then. Dr. Krieger, the lead scientist, was the first to be affected. Within hours of the test, he began changing. Within days, he wasn't human anymore. He became something else, something that could exist in both realities simultaneously. He's still alive, if you can call it that. He's what I am now, a hybrid tasked with monitoring and containing the situation. Her face flickered, and for a moment I saw her true form, a geometric impossibility of angles and light, beautiful and terrible, existing in more dimensions than my mind could process. Every person who gets too close to the truth changes. Your three hikers, the National Geographic team, the uranium miners, they're all part of the containment now, whether they wanted to be or not. And in 36 hours, when we detonate our new device, they'll all cease to exist. A mercy, really. You're talking about genocide, Patricia said, her hand moving to her service weapon. I'm talking about survival, replied. There are currently 2,847 changed individuals connected to the Devil's Canyon anomaly. They exist in a state between life and death, between here and there. When we cauterize the rift, they'll finally be at peace. And if your bomb doesn't work, I asked, if it just makes things worse? She stood, her form solidifying into something almost human. Then we implement Protocol 7, nuclear sterilization of the entire Southwest. Better to lose 3 states than the entire planet. After she left, Patricia and I sat in stunned silence. Maria B.A. entered with several other elders, having heard everything through the thin walls. She's lying, Maria said firmly. Not about everything, but about the most important part. The frequency in your grandfather's journal won't make the merger permanent. It will create a barrier, a membrane between worlds. They'll be able to coexist without contaminating each other. Thomas Benally nodded. The hero twins didn't destroy all the monsters because destruction isn't always the answer. Sometimes you must learn to live with danger, to manage it, to maintain balance. This is what your grandfather understood. Now, at 2:30 a.m. on October 1st, I crouched behind red rocks watching the military's final preparations. Their device was a mechanical horror that looked like a metallic spider made of black metal and pulsing cables. At its center was a sphere containing something that hurt to perceive directly, a piece of folded space, trapped and weaponized. Agent Winters supervised the operation, but she wasn't alone. Others like her moved between the soldiers like ghosts, hybrids who flickered between human and something else, adjusting equipment, taking readings, preparing for an event that would either save or damn us all. At 2:45 a.m., the ground began to change. Where the canyon had been, reality started to thin like ice over deep water. I could see through the earth to something beneath, not rock or magma, but architecture. Vast structures of living geometry, cities that breathed, technologies that were also organisms. I activated the device the hikers had given me. It hummed to life, displaying equations that rearranged themselves constantly, adapting to the changing dimensional conditions. My grandfather's journal fell open to a specific page, not code-talking records, but musical notation, a song I remembered him humming during my childhood. I began to sing. The effect was immediate. Every hybrid in the area turned toward me, their faces showing expressions of recognition, horror, and hope in equal measure. Agent Winter started running toward my position, her form shifting rapidly between states of existence. "Stop," she screamed, her voice fracturing into multiple harmonics. "You don't know what you're doing. The frequency isn't a barrier, it's an invitation. You're calling them here." But I couldn't stop. The song had taken hold of me, flowing through me like electricity made of sound and light. The symbols Maria B.A. had painted on my skin began to glow brighter, and I could feel myself changing, becoming something more than human, but not quite other. The military's device activated at exactly 3:00 a.m. A pulse of impossible energy erupted from it, racing toward the thinning boundary between worlds. At the same moment, my device reached its crescendo, broadcasting the frequency from my grandfather's journal at a volume that could be heard in dimensions we don't have names for. The two forces met exactly where the canyon had been, and for a moment, everything stopped. Time froze, the stars held their breath, reality itself paused to see what would happen next. Then the world exploded into impossibility. The canyon returned, but not as it had been. It existed in multiple states simultaneously, solid and gaseous, past and present, here and there. I could see all of its history at once, the ancient sea that had carved it, the Anasazi who had first discovered its properties, the Spanish conquistadors who had sealed it with Christian prayers and native magic, the army scientists who had broken those seals. And I could see the beings on the other side. They weren't monsters or invaders. They were explorers, scientists, refugees from a universe where different laws of physics had led to different forms of life. The rift wasn't an attack. It was a doorway they'd been trying to close from their side for 79 years, just as we'd been trying to close it from ours. Agent Winters reached me, her form now fully inhuman, a cascade of angles and impossibilities that hurt to look at directly. But instead of attacking, she embraced me. "You beautiful fool," she said, thought existed at me. "You've done it. Not what we planned, not what they planned, but something entirely new. You've created a stable paradox, a door that simultaneously opened and closed." The convergence hit at 3:33 a.m. Reality didn't end. It didn't merge. It did something unprecedented. It learned.